Thank you. My name is Matt. I'm alcoholism. It's a privilege to be here. My sobriety is May 16th, 1993. And my home group is most consistently the Hermosa Beach Monday Night Men's Stag, Hermosa Beach, California. And I did go through a lot to get here, so all pause. No, it's funny. It's like everything else. I didn't go through a lot. I sat in a chair and watched my flight get delayed longer and longer. I didn't want to tell you, I called my sponsor, you know, my guide in AA, and my sponsor for 29 of 31 years. And I said, yeah, my flight's delayed. He goes, go home, cancel. I don't think that's what you're supposed to say. Well, when I boarded in Atlanta at 2:30 this morning, I got it. Should always follow sponsorship advice. I got to my hotel at 4:30, and here I am. So one energy drink and Starbucks later, you can have a real fast talk. But I love AA, and in spite of whatever chairs I had to sit in and clocks I had to watch, it is a privilege to be here. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I owe everything to Alcoholics Anonymous. I like to say if you walked around my house and picked up anything, including my children, and flipped them upside down, it says property of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's how I always pray before I get up here that I don't talk too long, and that I don't talk too much about what it was like. But with that in mind, how many people here are in their first year of recovery? Yes, you know, so for you, I would like to say to you that in May of 1993, you know, I had warrants out for my arrest, and I had people that were looking for me that were more, I was afraid of more than the police. And I owed thousands of dollars in taxes, tens of thousands of dollars. I didn't have any friends. And that's not why I'm qualified to come speak to you. That's my circumstances. And one of the things I didn't understand for a couple of years in Alcoholics Anonymous is that my circumstances were not my problem. I had a problem, and there were a lot of accompanying circumstances. But I want to talk about alcoholism, but I don't want to tell you all the glory. I played in a band. I got kicked out of a really good band. That's talent, right? But they were really good. And I went to college, and there's all sorts of stories in between. But I want to talk about May of 1993 because I really want to talk about recovery tonight. And I always hope I'll get to what it's like now, but I haven't made it yet. So. But in May of 1993, my sobriety is May 16th, so we'll say May 1st. Right? What it looked like in my life is if I slept the night before, and I often did not, I lived in a big apartment by the beach. It sounds really fancy, but I wasn't paying the rent, so it's super easy. Right by the ocean, in Redondo Beach. And if I slept, I would wake up. This is a typical day. This is piecing together what I remember. But it's for you who are in your first year. I would wake up and I would say out loud, don't drink. Like first thing, I open my mind. Open my eyes, just open my mind. I didn't do that for years. But I said, don't drink, you know. And it's, I think the symptom of alcoholism that I thought I needed to say that out loud. Like there's two of us. Yeah. Hey, don't drink. Hey, okay. Right. But I would wake up and it was so agonizing that I drank so much the day before, alone in my apartment by the beach, right? That I would tell them, don't drink, like whatever you do. And I had all these great reasons to stop over the years. You know, I had a budding musical career. I had a lot of talent. And I drank that away. And I tried to stop drinking then. I would say this is a good moral reason, it's an ethical reason, it's a work reason. And I wouldn't stop. You know, and I was real close with my parents. And when I was waking up in this apartment in May of 1993, my mother was dying of cancer 2 miles away. And when I found out she was terminally ill, I wanted to not drink ever again. And I drank right away. And I had gotten this girl pregnant in May of 1993. She was 8.5 months pregnant. I was 31 years old and she was 18. You're judging me. I'm in an AA. This is the way it was like. So when I found out she was pregnant, I wanted to stop drinking. And when I wake up in the morning and Megan say, don't drink today, it's because my body didn't work anymore. I had constant diarrhea. I couldn't eat food. I didn't want food, but if I tried to eat it, I would not keep it down. I drank gin because gin was fast. I didn't particularly like it, but it worked very well. And so I'd wake up and say, don't drink, because I didn't want to feel sick all day. It was completely selfish. All the good reasons to stop drinking just blew right past me. So I walked down the hall of this house. It was great. It was a really nice apartment. And next to my bedroom, there was a big bathroom. I lived there by myself. There was a guy out of the country who was he paid the rent. I was supposed to send him a check, but not paying up in Mexico. It's just terrible. But I go into that bathroom and get in the shower. I don't know how many of you remember this. Probably the people in your first year. But when you're drinking all the time, and your life's a mess, and you wake up and you feel like the worst person in the world. Then you get in the shower and that hot water hits you, and you're dangerously like 8% better. Like, this ain't so bad. Right? Like I started to take a shower. I'm not drinking. We determined that, half an hour ago, the two of us talking in bed. And now I'm in the shower, and I got the shower water on me, and I'm waking up, and I scrape the shampoo off the soap dish, and I'm washing my hair, and I'm like, now I'm clean, and I'm not drinking. Like, I've improved 80% since I opened my mouth. But usually around then, I would have a thought, and back then, my thought often was, go visit your mother. I love my mother. My mother and father were in love with each other, and they were married at that time for 45 years, and they lived nearby. So I'm in the shower, I'm clean, I'm not drinking, and now I'm a good human. I'm going to go visit my mother. And then, this is what alcoholism was like for me. I'd open the sliding door, and I'd step out onto this really dirty bath mat. And when my foot would hit that bath mat, there's a phrase in the big book, in the prayer, third step prayer, that's called the bondage of self. And my foot would hit that bath mat, and one of the symptoms for me of the bondage of self would appear, and that's fear. I've noticed over the years, working with guys in AA and being around AA pretty consistently for a long time, there's two really pronounced symptoms of the bondage of self. It's fear and blame, fear and resentment. When I'm blaming you, or blaming my circumstances, or blaming my wife, or blaming my job, I'm in the bondage of self usually. And what the fear would look like is my foot would hit that bath mat, and I think, wait a minute, what does mom and dad know, and what do they not know? I don't know if they know there's a girl across town that's pregnant. I don't know if they know that. The reason I didn't know what anybody knew is because I lied all the time. I would watch myself do it, going, why are you telling this lie? I can never just say it. But I also did. I thought like I'd seen my mom a couple of weeks ago. That's what in my head. I haven't seen my mom for almost 7 months. But I'll take a little sideline. When you're sitting on a couch drinking, trying not to drink, and all your material possessions are disappearing, and all your self-respect is disappearing, and all your characters disappearing. Life's going on outside. So in my mind, mom and dad live a few miles away, and she's a certain place in her illness, and I saw her 2 weeks ago. I hadn't gone out of the door for months, and they were progressing. Their life is progressing. So now I'm afraid because I don't know what mom knows and what they don't know. And when I used to shave back then, which wasn't very often, that I'm going to see my mom, I would just look in my eyes because I couldn't look at myself. I looked really bad. I didn't know it at the time, but that day, May 1st, I weighed 108 pounds. And I'm 5'10". I was 5'10" when I was a grown man, but I'm old now. And I weighed at a natural level, like right now, I weigh 165 pounds. So somehow I weighed 108. So I would shave and look in my eyes. While I'm looking in my eyes and wanting to go see my mom and wanting to not drink and feeling proud of how clean I was, I would have to stop. If I just went next door to the liquor store and got 2 beers, that's not drinking. I could go see my parents, and the idea was, shuck and jive a little, letting them out, like, what do they know, what do they not know, kind of thing. And then be a good son and love my parents. And I really believed I wasn't going to drink that day. I think everybody in the room knows what happened, but I would find money. Sometimes I would, I'd find it in the couch. Sometimes I'd find it in an old pair of pants. Sometimes I'd pawn something. Yeah, I know I'm actually an alcoholic and not a drug addict because I once sold a guitar to a drug dealer and I went and got beer. He had a lot of cocaine, but I needed that. I needed beer. And so I go next door to the liquor store and I'm going to have 2 beers. And I'm positive I'm going to have 2 beers. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind I'm going to go see my mom. I know I am. And I walk into the liquor store and by the time I get to the beer cooler, they're so much smaller than they were yesterday. They shrink. And so I'm looking at the 2 beers, I'm looking at my money, and above the 2 beers are 2 Fosters. Australians know how to make 2 beers, they're big. So, and this is honestly what my life is like. And I go, okay, well that's technically 2 beers. So I take that. This is how it happens, right? Kind of and powerful. When I get to the front counter, this is so funny. I would put the beers down, and there was this guy, Mr. BJ, who owned this place, and he would look over his glasses like this. Man, you got a problem. Your problem is trying to convince you that you don't have a problem. And I would say, are you the Riddler? I just want a virus. You did this yesterday. It's not hard. And then while he's looking at me, and I don't want to listen to him, I'm looking over his shoulder, and there's a fifth of gin. Not good gin, but it's gin. And it costs as much as these Fosters. Now, I'm not stupid. This is concentrated alcohol. This is highly diluted alcohol. Right? I may need some later. So I go, I don't want these, I want that. And he'd shake his head and tell me my problem. And then I go home, I'm just going to have a little. I swear to God. I have a little. And then the dragon wakes up. And I had to drink even faster because I had to forget that I was going to go see my mom. During your first year, I did that day after day after day. And I sincerely didn't want to drink that day. That's why I'm standing here. Nothing to do with my circumstances. I've seen selfish people get themselves in terrible circumstances without an alcohol problem. I raised teenagers. Just watch them. So that's what I was like, right? And what happened was, there was a Mother's Day that year, which was fortunate because it contributed to me, and it was May 9th. It's the day over the first step. And what happened was May 8th, my brother called and said, hey, tomorrow's Mother's Day. And he said, I know you're having car trouble, and it may be Mom's last Mother's Day. So I'm going to come pick you up because we're going to go to brunch. So many things were wrong with that sentence. First of all, I'm not having car trouble. I know where the key is. You haven't seen my car in a long time. But in an Irish Catholic family, that's car trouble. You don't have to hurt your feelings. And the second thing is it can't be Mom's last Mother's Day. It can't be. And this woman that I wasn't going to visit wasn't just like a good mom. She was a great human being. And I'm the youngest of 4 in an Irish Catholic family. I'm super glad Catholics don't believe in birth control because I was a total mistake. My parents were done. And 7 years later, I popped up. In fact, I'm named Matthew because it means gift from God. I said to my dad, and nuns told me at school, I ran home from 3rd grade. I go, Dad, my name means gift from God. He goes, yeah, it's kind of marketing spin. So then I didn't know what that meant. So I'm like, I was marketing spin. I go, what does that mean? This woman, this mother, Dorothy, she saw me. She would go, Catholic school, we don't have a lot of money. And she would go do yard duty. And she used to teach there before I went there. But she saw me a couple times during 7th grade and 8th grade at the yard. And she came home one day and she goes, you don't get picked first for the team, do you? I said, Mom, I don't care about that stuff. I got good friends in school. I don't care about sports. Now, I'm competitive, but not like that. I'm intellectually competitive. I like school. And she said, yeah, but you don't get you got to have something for you, honey. And I go, okay. And she said, do you want to play an instrument? And I was sitting in a rocking chair. I used to sit in every morning and every afternoon listen to music. And I jumped out of the rocking chair and said, I want to play the guitar. Because I worship guitar players. There was a guy named Steve Howe in a band called Yes that I thought was from another world. I loved Eric Clapton. Everybody. You put music on, I hear just the guitar. I've always been that way. And my mother looked a little sad, like weirded out by my enthusiasm. And she went and bought me a guitar that day. And we had soup for a couple weeks. So I'm Catholic, I thought, this must be some Lent thing, you know. It was because we had no money. And she wanted a guitar. So she spent the budget. And we had Campbell's, you know, it was out on the shelf outside. That's who I didn't go see every day. So it's Mother's Day, and it might be your last Mother's Day. And I get off the phone, and I'm already mad at my brother for pretending I have car trouble, because we're prickly alcoholics, right? But I'm like, it's Mom's last Mother's Day. I'm going to go get some flowers, which I wouldn't be stealing, because flowers are free, God made them. And I want to write a card, because I have a degree in English and a degree in religious studies, which makes me qualified to write a Mother's Day card. Not much else. But I had plans for her. And I'm standing there hungover, probably drunk. And I sat down on the couch, and he honked his horn. And I'm going to sit there drinking all night again. And I want to hurry this up, but I hadn't changed my clothes in a couple of days. And I ran outside so he wouldn't come inside. And I ruined Mother's Day. I don't know why. I don't know why I did that stuff. I never meant to do that stuff. And I don't even know what I did. I just saw their faces. I was down there, I've been up all night drinking, and I saw their faces. I saw them, first of all, they were stunned, and then they just stopped looking at me, and then they turned away from me. And, you know, I've had a lot of bitter and incomprehensible demoralization in my life. But that was one of the worst moments in my life, because these were the last people who were mandated to love me. And they were just done. In fact, I asked my sister on my 20th birthday, what happened? On Mother's Day, she said, we're never going to talk about that. It was 20 years before that. I said, well, you're not doing that bad. She goes, darling, my love, because I'm really close with her. She said, you were vile to our mother. Why would I do that? But I was drunk. So my brother drove me home, and you know, I know there's a lot of people, and I know we're in the South, and I want to talk about God. But I think it's a lot more profitable when you're new in sobriety to talk about grace. I think it's just an easier thing to swallow. And I want to tell you, if you're in your first year, you had a ton of grace already happening in your life. Even if you're in your first week, because you're sitting here. Right? And I know about 20% of the room doesn't want to be here. I know that. Like somebody brought you. Or you told somebody 2 weeks ago you were going to drive them, and you're like, oh crap, that's tonight. I know, but it's like, but a bunch of stuff happened, a bunch of grace happened, and you're here. Never took that for granted. It said earlier today, it was said from the podium by Brandon, who has been wonderful. Thank you, Brandon, for all the coffee, and thank you, Rusty, for not picking me up at the airport. Everybody's been so nice. And he said you have to be present to win. He said you have to be present to win. I thought, I gotta go all this following. Because you can't win unless you're present. And when I'm in the bondage of self, I'm not present. And I haven't seen that there's grace all around me yet. And my brother and I fought all the way home from the brunch. And I don't know what we fought about, but it doesn't matter. But I didn't know, if you're new, that I was setting the wheels of grace in motion. I didn't know that. By being mad at my brother. And we got to my apartment, and I got so mad because he was talking down to me. He's 7 years older than me. I just ruined Mother's Day. He's 12 years sober. He has a beautiful wife. He has a lovely home. He's true to his family. He's true to his job. He visits my parents. And I thought I had the moral higher ground in the argument. That's alcoholism, right? And I slammed the door and thought, I'm not going to lose this fight. And Grace was going, good. Hang on to that. I didn't know. And I went into my apartment and I paced around. I gave him time to get home. He lived in Lane, Wandale. I lived in Redondo Beach. I didn't pay my rent. I lived in the Redondo Beach. Right? He paid his rent, so he lived in an affordable town. And I waited till he got home, and I called him up, and I just let him have it. I just yelled, and I'd love to have a transcript of this. What could I possibly have said? But I was mad. And I didn't let him talk back. I probably, being his little brother all my life, it was no picnic. You know, he was a terrible raging alcoholic in my family. And when I finally got done talking, he just said very quietly into the phone, "Matthew, I think you have a problem with alcohol." And I did not expect it. And the other thing I didn't expect was what accidentally came out of my mouth. I honestly, you have to trust me, I didn't know I was going to say this, but I said, "Of course I do." And I feel, looking back at that moment, like God hit me between the shoulder blades, and the truth stumbled out of my mouth. And I was surprised I said that, because I've been in bands where the management company goes, "Hey, you got to stop drinking." I was engaged for 10 minutes to this girl, and I met her parents, and "Walk with me, talk with me. You are not marrying our daughter." That kind of everybody's But he said it, my brother, who I'm kind of afraid of. And he said, "You have a problem with alcoholism?" I said, "Of course I do." And then he got really funny. He didn't mean to be funny, but he goes, "Don't go anywhere." I go, "Okay." I don't go anywhere in 7 months. And I was going to move to that end of the couch in the fall. It's just so funny the way we see the world, right? And it was interesting. I sat on my couch thinking, my brother's going to come through that door. He's going to kick the hell out of me. And I'm never going to drink again. I had some family history to believe that might be his approach. But I also was kind of hoping someone would do that to me. I was so sick of it. And he didn't. He came through the door, and he smelled the apartment. He goes, "Let's go down to the beach." A little writer there. And we went down to the beach, and I had these cigarettes, a pack of cigarettes. We sat on the lifeguard stand. God bless my brother. He had quit smoking, but I was trying to light a cigarette, and I was shaking because I thought he was going to hit me. And he took the cigarettes, and he lit 2 of them. And he didn't smoke. But he was just trying to get me to calm down. So he took his cigarette, and I took the cigarette. We're looking at each other. And I'm waiting for something. And he just quietly starts telling me how he felt. My mom and dad kicked him out of our house. He was 18. And I couldn't believe we did that. I was 11 years old. I couldn't believe we did that. And he's sitting there telling me how he felt that day. So I was curious about that. And then he looked at me for a minute and go, "What's your plan?" And I think, he has no idea. He has no idea. I'm wanted by the police. I owe tens of thousands of dollars to people. And then he told me how he felt when his wife and son kicked him out of their house. He had gotten his high school girlfriend pregnant when he was about 20 years old or 20. I don't know how old. I was 14 when this happened, so he was 21 or 22. And he got kicked out of the house, and he told me how he felt that day. And I remember that day because he called me, my cool brother. My brother is very good looking. He plays the drums, looks like Paul McCartney, great businessman, very, very smart man. And he had no one left to call but his little brother. That's how cool my brother was. And he called me that day, and he told me, "I don't know what to do." And I was a little kid, and I said, "Why don't you quit drinking?" And he said, "You don't understand." And I didn't, because I hadn't started. And then he said, "What's your plan?" And I thought, he has no idea. I pushed that pregnant girl down a flight of stairs 2 nights ago. He doesn't even know who I am anymore. And I didn't realize it, but in the house, when I said, "Of course I do," I worked the first half of the first step. I admitted it. Sitting on that lifeguard stand when he'd say, "What's your plan?" I was getting technicolor. Your life has become a manager. Because I believed that if I told my brother what was really going on, he wouldn't believe it. I got 2 degrees from the top of my class. I toured all over the world. I did everything I ever wanted to do. Everything I said I was going to do, I did it. And now I'm dying in an apartment, hurting people that don't deserve it, stealing from people that don't deserve it. And then he told me how he felt when he lived in his car. I didn't like that era of our family's life. And right in the middle of that, I realized he's talking about how I feel. That's what he's doing. He's telling my story. Because it wasn't about the circumstances. He kept telling me how he felt. And suddenly there was one other person on earth that knew how I felt. And it took me years to figure out. My brother was just doing the chapter working with others in the Big Book of Gospels. It said, tell them a little bit of your own story and tell it about them. And he didn't see me as his little brother who needed his ass kicked. He saw me as a man suffering from alcoholism, and he just showed up armed with certain facts about himself. And he changed my life. I'd like to tell you I had an awakening and surrendered, but I ran out of cigarettes. Like, I want to be honest, you know. And he's still talking. I'm like, oh, God. So just to get off the lifeguard stand, I go, okay, I'm going to go to AA. And he goes, he looks at me and goes, you're not going to AA. And I'm like, what? And he goes, no, dude, you're going to a hospital. And I said this, I go, I'm really busy. And then he goes, 30 days. And I'm like, whoa. So let's paint the picture. I had pushed a pregnant girl down a flight of stairs. And I wasn't mad at her. I just wanted her to get out of the doorway, and I pushed it too hard. I wasn't aggressive. Like this, right? It wasn't spousal abuse, it was child abuse. She was young. I should not have been in her life. I pushed her down a flight of stairs 2 nights ago. I had a gun in my mouth when my brother called about Mother's Day. But let's not rush into rehab. Right? That's a little extreme. What is wrong with us? But I'm like, I don't think I need to be mad. I can probably make this work out. It's just such a funny thing. And he ignored that. How busy I was. And he walked me home, and I was walking up the stairs to my apartment, and he goes, hey man, and I looked down and he goes, please don't die. I thought he knew that I had a gun in my apartment. But he thought, this kid can't die before mom. And I looked like that. I looked like the Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, like not the movie, The Rocket. I was not good. So the reason my Friday's May 16th is they couldn't figure out how to get me into rehab. This isn't when there was one on every corner, you know. This is the 90s. We didn't have cell phones. I got sober BC, you know. But he called me on May 15th, and I was drunk. He said, hey, I'm going to pick you up tomorrow. I got to take you to mom's and dad's house, and they're going to take you to rehab. And I was like, oh, great, I'll do my laundry, right? I went, oh, God, did I agree to this? You know, and I hung up and I just drank all night. Because I was so afraid. I don't want to go there. I need this stuff. So what happened is May 16th, the phone rang. I had passed out on the floor. I had fallen backwards. I was in this really awkward position. But there was a mystery there, too. I'd fallen on a big gulp. You know, big gulps.
Yeah.
I've fallen on one, which you don't know immediately when you wake up out of a blackout. You're like, I feel squishy, you know. But the funny part about this is 7-Eleven was miles away, and I never left my apartment. So the Martians might hear fall on this, you know. I don't know where it came from. But I found it, you know. And so I woke up, the phone's ringing, my head hurts because I hit the wall. I got Coca-Cola all over my back. I'm wearing hospital scrubs and a t-shirt. And I answer the phone thinking it's my brother, and it's this woman that said, your daughter was born. We've been trying to get a hold of you all night.
Oh.
But when I get the phone ringing in the middle of the night, I don't answer because those are the bad guys. And so I probably heard it. But this is the funny part. All this grace, right? All this grace. I said, of course I do. My brother came to my house. He didn't beat me up. He shared his experience. I surrendered. Grace, grace, grace. I couldn't have made any of that happen. But I found my car. She said, can you get to the hospital? I said, yes. And I went to where my car key was with a lot of optimism. And I put on flip-flops. I got Coke down my back. I'm wearing the clothes I've been wearing for a couple of days. And I ran out in the sunlight looking for my car. And I found it. And I got in it. And I drove right to the wrong hospital. I got there real fast. They were there, and which is typical, right? In the big book it says, you know, alcoholics are selfish and self-centered. I went to the hospital where I was born. That's where babies come from. But you know, all this grace is happening, and I think I'm just a loser. I ran in there, and there's this candy striper, and she was like 110 years old, not like 50 years old. And I'm yelling at her about finding my daughter. And I got the name wrong, and then I got the name right, and she's like, you can get as mad as you want, they're not here. And I went back outside, and I just was at the Getty Museum in Malibu about a year ago, and there was a vase in the Getty Museum that was paper thin, this tall, and it was made before Christ was born. It's like 2,900 years old. And I remember looking at that vase thinking how fragile it was and how beautiful it was. It got my attention. And it was like I walked out in that parking lot, and I took that vase and I smashed it in the parking lot. And it was, all the pieces were glittering up on the asphalt. And that was my life, that was my character, that was my beautiful parents. That was all my upbringing, that was all my gifts that I threw away. And I couldn't fix it. I was seeing, it's called a moment of clarity. I could see how bad it was, and I could see there was no way to fix it. And I decided to kill myself. And I walked out to my car, and I put my head on the steering wheel, and I was bawling my eyes out because I was afraid. I wasn't going to kill myself for any noble reason. I'm a coward. I'm really a coward. And I don't want any more pain. My mom's not going to die while I'm alive. I'm not going to be a dad because I don't know what that even is. I'm just going to go take a shortcut. And I started my car with my head on the steering wheel, and the car bucked. It hadn't been driven a long time, and it was an AMC. And I started it and went boom. And the name of the right hospital came into my head. Grace. And I know that's grace. Anybody here meditate? Okay, 4 of you. It's a step. If you try to meditate for more than 5 minutes, like the rest of you try to meditate for 5 minutes, 2 days in a row, the first thing you find out is you're not in charge of the thoughts that come into your head. Right? You're not. I was in Australia last year. I was meditating in my hotel room. Carlo Rojo came into my head. Carlo Rojo wouldn't go to a dance with me and eat great. I'm 62 years old. And I'm like, yeah, Carlo Rojo, you know. That's how random the thoughts are becoming. And I wasn't trying to think of the name of the right hospital. I was trying to go kill myself. And I had an involuntary electrical synapse. And the name of that's grace. That's the definition of it. Nothing to do with my will. And I raced to the right hospital. I didn't shoot myself. And I ran up into that room, and I ran across there, and there was Anna. And Anna had been having a baby all night. You ever seen a woman that's been having a baby all night? Not her best look, let me say that. And I didn't love her anyway, and I've already determined I don't care what you think of me, so that's okay. I'm just being honest. Why would I lie from here? I didn't love her. We had a physical relationship. And I ran into this hospital room, and she jumped out of the bed, and she was happy to see me. I was embarrassed. And right when I saw how happy she was, I remembered that I pushed her down the stairs. And when I'd done that, I just closed the door and went in and drank. I didn't even look. I asked her years later, why didn't she come back to my apartment? She goes, would you? So she was coming towards me, and I'm suddenly realizing how dirty and smelly I am. And she reached into this plexiglass box, and she hands me this Phoebe rose, this beautiful baby. And she was so innocent and so beautiful, and I just felt like throwing up. I didn't feel in love. I felt I was in the bondage of self. I felt ugly and disgusting. Because when you're in the bondage of self like me, you try to paint everything in the room with your own ugliness. That's how I do it. I'm a cheat, you're a cheat, I'm a thief, you're a thief, I'm a liar, you're a liar. It just makes it easier. But my paint would not stick on these precious women. And I couldn't stand being near them. So I lied. The first thing I said in front of my daughter was lie. I said, everything's going to be all right. And what I decided was, I'm just going back to plan B. I'm going to go shoot myself. And I raced home, and I ran up the stairs, and my brother's standing on my porch. Grace. He's got a duffel bag next to him, and he's standing outside my apartment. I go, hey, I need to go inside. He goes, why? I got your stuff. We're going to rehab. I go, no, I need to go inside. He goes, no, you don't. He locked the door, and he took me away. That's what it was like, and that's what happened. I got a little bit of time to tell you the next 30 years. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about early time, but all I remember from that hospital is I gained 47 pounds. Just 30 days, I was hungry, I was tired, I slept a lot, I ate a lot. And I'm sure they tried to help, but I was there for 30 days, and my brother picked me up and he drove me home and kicked me out of the car and said, go to a meeting, and I lied to him, because I lied all the time back then. And I said, of course, you can go to a meeting. But I was 30 days sober, and I wanted to go see my mom. I wanted to do my laundry and see my child. I had plans, and this guy seemed a little intense. I just got out of rehab. I wanted to go to a meeting. Still, right? I did that, And I went to my apartment, and there was a party in my apartment. And the door was unlocked, and I didn't know anybody, and I lived there alone. I know, ever go to one of those parties? Like, this was my house. There were girls in bikinis snorting cocaine off the glass table, which was okay, and somebody handed me a beer, and there was hot smoke in the air. And if you're in your first year, I want to tell you what happened. I backed up, put that beer down, and ran away. And I want to tell you why. Because there was a moment of grace in there. I walked into my favorite Olympic events, right? Yeah. This is my favorite type of scene. And I walked in with 30 days, and I looked around, and a lot of my stuff's gone now. And my first thought was, you've got nothing. You have no character, self-respect, prospects, or material goods. I mean, it was so obvious. And I thought, if I could sign my name to something that was mine, that I didn't owe anyone, that no one could take, what could I write down? This is all going through my mind in a second. And all I could write down was 30 days. So if you're in this room and you have less than a year, please tonight pray the gratitude prayer of the number of days you have. Because whether you believe it or not, whether you think the problem with your spouse, or the problems you're having with money, or all the things you're going through in your first year are your problems, you have one problem, and it's alcoholism. And it has been arrested by grace. And I didn't want to lose the one thing I had with the losers again. I didn't want to throw it away on the cute girls in bikinis. I did that. And I got kicked out of the best job I ever had. So I ran away. I ran and found a phone booth. There's some new people in here. They're in class. And I called AA. And I told the guy everything I told you. I've been talking for 40 minutes, right? And the guy said, that's great. Where are you? I said, I'm on the corner of Shadow Beach Boulevard and Pearl. And he said, there's a meeting right across the street from where you're standing. Grace. I can't make that happen. There's so many things that have happened to you, even today, that you couldn't make. You have to be present to win. There's grace all around me. I'm just in the bondage of self. I can't see it. So I went into this meeting. I was terrified. The speaker got up and sounded like Charlie Brown. And you all were loving it and laughing. And I was thinking, I'm screwed, right? And then he pointed to the steps and said, these are tools for living. I thought, well, that's cool. I got a degree. And I looked up at the steps and I'm looking at them like, why are they in Chinese? They don't apply to me. I need lawyers, guns, and money. I don't need a prayer of meditation. So I just sat there for an hour because I had nowhere to go. And when I got up to leave, this guy walked by and he was a friend of my brother's. And he goes, hey, you're Neil's brother. And I said, yeah. He actually said, I heard you look like shit. I said, well, that was 30 days ago. I'm working on myself. And I want to bring this up, I didn't have anywhere to go. And he was trying to give me a ride home. And he offered to take me to my parents' house. And I said, I can't go to my parents' house. Because my perception was it would be bad for them. My mother and father are in love with each other. My father's dying. They've earned some peace. I'm not going to show up on their door being a loser kid, fresh out of rehab with an illegitimate daughter. And this guy drove me to my parents' house. Because another thing about grace is there's things happening all the time that are conspiring to help the next moment happen. And this guy had helped my brother paint my dad's house when my mom got diagnosed with cancer. So even though I wouldn't tell him where my parents lived, he did. The one guy would walk by. And I went up to the door of my parents' house. I always tell this detail because I think it's interesting. I think it's Grace. He drove off, and I rang the doorbell, and I just wanted to run away. And if you've ever been to Torrance, California, there's nothing but parents' house. That's all that's there. Right? There's nowhere else to go. So I'm standing around my parents' house, and I want to run, and I look down, and there's a guitar pick with my signature on it on the porch. And my mother and father are fastidious. They're clean, they're neat, they're organized. I haven't been there for 7 months. I don't know why that's sitting there, but it was interesting enough for me to stare at it. And I hadn't had those guitar picks since I played with them. Those were gone. And I'm looking down at it, and the door, they answer the door together because they're Midwesterners, they do that. My mom strapped to a giant can of oxygen when they opened the door. They were so glad to see me. I didn't know, I've raised 4 children sober, right? I didn't know what reality was. I knew what my perception was. Right? Reality was they're married to each other for 45 years. They're madly in love with each other. And every night they're laying awake, praying the rosary. This guy. And I just walked up on the porch and said the magic words, "Will you help me?" They couldn't have been better. You must be present to win. There were so many ways I didn't want to show up to everything I've told you so far. And all I did was get dropped off there. And my dad and mom invited me in. They put me in my old bedroom, and it all began. And I want to tell you, if you're new, the reason every time you go to a meeting, you hear the words, get a sponsor and work the steps. We're actually talking about other stuff, but that's because what your ears are trying to tell you, you have to do. I've noticed that in AA. I've come for years and years and years. And it used to be like, all I ever heard was get a sponsor, work the steps. And then after I got a sponsor, all I ever heard was do a 4-step. All I ever heard. Then after a while, after I did a 5-step, all I ever heard was make your amends. We're saying all these messages. We're just tuning in to what we need.
Yeah.
So what you're hearing is get a sponsor, work the steps. Get a sponsor. And don't work the steps. Practice them. It says in the book, practice them. Because if you work them, you'll be done with them. And then you're in real trouble. I'm going to tell you about some magic that happened. I got a sponsor and I worked the steps. I did all sorts of uncomfortable things. We did a 3rd step where we had to kneel down on his floor and holding hands. It was so gay. I know you're a baby over here, but you know what I mean. And he went down holding his hands like this, like this. And he's like, God, I asked myself to be. I'm like, God, I offer myself to be. But I got back up. And I was like, okay, is that it? Did I just go to God? I was like, what was that? But what I found out later, what I can tell you is I did something very uncomfortable for me. I didn't want to do that. And I didn't understand it. Because I didn't want to live the way I've been living. And that's the whole program. That's step 2 and step 3, step 4 and step 5. I want to talk about 6 and 7, but I have to tell the pre-story. So one of the cool things that happened, I went to meetings every day because I lived at my parents' house and they made me really uncomfortable. They used to do this weird stuff like tell the truth and love me. I thought that was a little oppressive. And honestly, in my first few months of sobriety, I had not been around nice people for so long. I just felt uncomfortable. So I would run off to a meeting, I always, this is funny, I didn't mean to tell this, but I remember when that step happened. We came to believe, my dad was making breakfast one morning. I saw him. I smelled him making breakfast, and that's a bad thing. My mom makes breakfast. My dad fought the war and went to work. That was his job. And I ran down the hall at 6:45, and I go down, let me help you. And it was back. There was eggs and stuff. Bacon was in the wrong pan. So I just was sorting stuff out, talking to him. And he started telling me how much he loves my mom. And I'm looking at him, and he's talking about intimacy. He's talking about real love. And I saw him. I went, wow, this guy is so beautiful. He's been through so much. He's been married for 45 years. And he just wants to tell me how much he loves my mom. And I could see him. I got enough relief from the bondage of self. I got present enough to win. I saw the grace. And then I looked down at my watch and go, it's 6:45. I want to go to the 7 a.m. meeting. Now, I want to be honest, if you're in your first year, I went to the 7 a.m. meeting every day because sometimes Carol would go to that meeting. And Carol would share inappropriately about her sex life. And I like that. It's attraction. I love it, the women in the room, some of them like, I know a Carol, and some of them like, I think I'm Carol. Is that inappropriate what I said last night? I gave up on the watch, I'm here for the rest of the night. So I went to the meeting because Carol might talk about an orgy or something good. And I get there, and this guy Bill shared it, and Bill was funny. Bill used to say, I got a lot of opinions, they're just my opinions, but you should have them too. And I looked at him, I saw him. I got relief from the bondage stuff. And that guy's been my sponsor for 30 years. So all this stuff, all this magic's happening. And I gotta make this story quick, but through a series, well, I just remembered a guy's name. He was visiting from out of town, and I remembered his name. He came back and visited. And I had this terrible job, and I lived at my parents' house, and I helped my mom and my dad. And it was perfect. It was really uncomfortable, but it was perfect. I would love to do that again. I would love to go back. But this guy, I remembered his name. He came back to the meeting, and he goes, "What do you do for a living?" I go, "I'm a newspaper." I was so nervous, and he goes, "I don't even know what you just said." But he hired me, and he was vice president of an airline. So I just remember the guy's name, and I got a job. You got to be present to win. It's not about hustling somebody for a job. I've watched people do this in AA. You surrender, step 3, right? And I got this job, and I remember I was starting at the job, and at the airport it's great. There's beautiful women from all over the world and gay men. So all the competition's gone. It's just beautiful women. So I don't go out at night with everybody because they're not drinking and I'm not chasing women. What am I going to say? Hey, I live with my parents. I have a baby and I go to AA, but maybe we could have dinner sometime. I wasn't the chick man that I'd hear before you asked, right? I'm just an old guy now, but so people at the airport didn't trust me. I remember I was checking somebody in and this very nice man next to me goes, "This is hell, isn't this job hell?" And I go, "Dude, I've been to hell. This is awesome." So I was going to work one day, and I've been paying money back to everybody, and I went and bought a guitar on my way to work, a really nice guitar. Taylor Dan Curry, single cutaway, beautiful guitar. Play guitar, you're jealous of me. But I realized I can't show anybody at work because they think I'm a mole who works for the vice president. And I'm going home to my parents who weren't excited about my rock and roll life. Which I think is funny, right? My uncles all died of alcoholism. My grandfather died of alcoholism after Bill Wilson stepped in. Yeah, a little history. He died of alcoholism. Bill Wilson came by. And my parents thought like Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney were responsible. My alcoholism. Maybe not. It might be the Irishness, But I bought a guitar on the way to work, and I kept visiting it and petting it. Taylor's had really beautiful cases, and I love guitars. And I walked out to the employee bus stop, and I felt so lonely. Like no one cares. And it's so good looking, this guitar. Then I looked at this woman next to me from British Airways, and I said, "Hey, can I show you this guitar I just bought?" And this poor woman from British Airways, I did not work for British Airways, and she looked at me and she said, "I don't look at strange men's guitar." Like I'm some kind of creep. And I'm like, I haven't even started with the baby in the AA line. And I said, no, I just want to show it to somebody. And she got on the bus. And she said, "Get away from me." So I got on the bus, and uncomfortably for her, it was packed. So she went right here, and I got my guitar. And she had a book in her hand called Surprised by Joy by C.S. Lewis. Very beautiful book about Christianity. And I could tell she was uncomfortable, so I said, "Hey, I've read that book, what do you think?" And she goes, "Well, cut to the chase," in this beautiful British accent. I won't try to imitate her, but she said, "Cut to the chase. Do you believe in God?" And like the dork that I am on, "God's sorry, but I'm not." And all the blood ran out of her face. She's like, "I gotta get away from this man." And she can't. It's a 20-minute bus ride. And I'm like, "Okay, Matthew, take it down a notch." And I said, "What do you think?" She goes, "I don't believe in God." And I said, "Oh, why are you reading that book?" She goes, "Because I'm looking." And so I said, tell me about the God you don't believe in. So we talked for 20 minutes. And while we were talking, I realized she's really pretty. I didn't care about that earlier. I just wanted eyes for a guitar, right? But oh my God, she's so pretty, and I'm relaxed. And that's not my MO. Normally I lie when I'm around a beautiful woman because I'm not enough. But I didn't. I just listened to her because I've been doing work in AA. And at the end of it, all I remember, we're getting on the bus, and I said, you know, I don't know anybody that would believe in the God that you don't believe in. That's not the God I believe. I have a God that beats my heart, grows my hair, and I just let him take care of it. And I got off the bus, and I started to go back to my car, but there was something between us. It wasn't just her, and it wasn't me. There was something between us. So I ran back, and I said, hey, would you like to have dinner sometime? And she goes, oh, God, this is what I thought. And just give me a new one. Like, oh, yeah, would you like a guitar? I read that book. And she was so nice a minute ago, you know. Carlo Romo 2.0, you know. And I said, hey, no is a complete answer. And she goes, okay, no. And I'm not bold with women, I'm not, but I just said, I think we're missing something. And I did think that. And I liked me. I went out. My dad used to wait up for me, and so sweet, I told him about this girl. I said, Dad, I met this girl, and she felt like home. And he goes, really? And he goes, tell me about that. Now, I used to think, God, he's interested. Later, I realized he just wants me to move out. Nice. And I told him the story. I told you, and we're walking down the hall. I'll never forget this. And he put his hand on my shoulder blades, like my back, and he said, that's not over, son. And then, you didn't hear her. It's over. And, but he rubbed my back. And he went into he was my mom, and I went into my own bedroom. And I woke up the next day, and I went to my meeting, and I did everything, and then I went to work. And that night, I tried to get to the early bus so I wouldn't see this woman. And I heard these high heels coming up behind me, and she tapped me on the shoulder, and it's her. I turned around. She said, I think I was rude to you. And I said, that's okay. And she said, I don't want to go out with you. I said, you've been very clear about that. She said, but if you want to miss this bus, I'll have coffee with you. Ooh. And I said, yes, please. And 17 days later, Philippa Jane Headley Clark proposed to me. And we've been married for 30 years. I picked an ice queen to show my guitar to. And I was married her for 30 years. I don't know if that's good or bad. But the reason I tell you this is because all the best things that have happened to me in recovery is because I got out of my own way. I became present to win. I had no idea that was going to be the theme tonight. You have to be present to win. And I'm in the bondage of self. And I've got 12 spiritual exercises. They can take me out of the bondage of self. So Philip and I have had a lovely life. We had babies together. And the first people at the hospital were Hannah and Phoebe, my daughter, and my mother and my daughter. And Phoebe grew up to be a beautiful woman. And she became a psych nurse. And in March, last year and a half ago, she called and said, can you and Pip come up to Portland? That's where my daughter lives. And I said, I'd love to come up to Portland. She goes, can you stay at this hotel? I said, yes. She said, you need to be here by this date. And I said, no problem. So I got Pip in the car. My wife, long story, but she's disabled now. I got her up to Portland, and we went to the right hotel, and I called Phoebe, and she goes, not yet. Maybe tomorrow. I said, okay. So I waited, and then she called the next day and said, it's time. And I got my wife. We both got in the same car. And we went to the right hospital where Phoebe was giving birth to my grandson. She invited me into the room, and Anna was there, and her husband. Phoebe was there, and I got to hold Emmett when he was still steaming. And when they handed Emmett to me, I just looked at Phoebe, and we couldn't look away from each other. When I met her, I wanted to blow my head off. And 30 years later, all I saw was grace. I was so present because of these steps, because of being uncomfortable a lot. because of spending 24 hours getting to Myrtle Beach. That's what it takes. I started this talk telling you, this is a privilege. This is a privilege. I have been blessed beyond measure. You know, my wife's disabled, my parents died, I've had all the regular stuff people have. But I'll tell you what, if you're new here, people are going to come up to you and go, everything's going to be all right. They are lying. But what they mean is, you know, you seem to think you have a lot of problems right now. You have one problem, and you have circumstances. And circumstances, whether you're sober or not, they change like the weather. And if you do these spiritual exercises, and if you inconvenience yourself with somebody else, and if you're honest with at least one person in your life, no matter what happens to you, you're going to be all right. And isn't that all we ever want? It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
But deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power,